This topic of sexual frustration is actually very crucial to understand because a lot of people have this conflict between sexuality and spirituality. Now, there has been this fantasy in the Eastern culture, a, a wrong notion about controlling the sexual urge to attain enlightenment. And this has been happening since a very long time because it is believed that control over one's sexual energy is going to raise the potent Kundalini energy, and somehow it is going to awaken the third eye, and then there will be awakening or enlightenment. But you see, the problem is that when it leads to unhealthy suppression, now there are two things here. One is a conscious control. Now, conscious control is something which is, which one exercises as a part of healthy living. And suppression is an idea in the mind that I must not feel this because this is ugly. This is horrible. This is going to pull me down as a human being, and it's going to completely destroy my spiritual progress. A lot of youngsters have this idea that somehow this sexuality is a bad thing, that even to feel sexual is wrong, and that they must completely suppress themselves. And the result of all this suppression and repression is that one starts getting aggressive because you are pushing down a very potent force. You're pushing down a natural biological drive that has been given to you by nature for the purpose of creation. But you see, these wrong notions that you have to forget everything and focus on God or your spiritual practice or your work or whatever, first attain this, first do this, then you will then think about sex and all these things. These kind of notions end up in suppression, and more people then torture themselves in the name of self improvement, spirituality, and whatever. And the outcome of such a suppression is violence. Violence towards oneself, violence towards another human beings. And we have seen so many cases where people in prominent spiritual positions, people of prominent, very well known people, have been found, with young children in compromising position, sex scandals, and so many other things. Whether it is the clergy or the people in the monasteries. So, one questions as to why does such a thing happen? And the answer is simple: because you are going against the law of nature, what nature has provided you. We are all sexual beings, and this energy has been given to us for a purpose. Now, when they say that controlling your sexual urge pushes the Kundalini upwards, they are not entirely wrong with that concept. But it is just a concept. The idea here is to cultivate a state of mind where thoughts are in harmony. So when our psychological state is serene, when we are in harmony with the world, the surge in the Kundalini or energy, the potent energy, automatically it happens. The more effort you put trying to suppress your sexual urges and trying to push your Kundalini energy, the more blockages it will create in different parts of the body. But if you let things be, if you let energy work its way, then there is nothing to be done as such. The energy follows its own will. And with that understanding, you don't have to do a thing. Whatever blockages need to be unblocked, they will be unblocked on their own. The more you try to push things, the more you try to put pressure, or try to do a sadhana forcefully, the more obstructions you will create in your spiritual path. And more it will frustrate you. There was this monk who came to meet Jiddu Krishnamurti. And he was so absorbed in this idea of spiritual growth that he saw his sexual urges as an obstacle to his attainment of enlightenment. So he got himself operated. He underwent a castration. And when he met Jiddu Krishnamurti, he was in tears, repenting on what he had done out of ignorance. Even Ramana Maharishi says that the true meaning of brahmacharya is living in Brahman. Now, living in Brahman can be practiced by a householder. It does not mean completely shutting down your sexual energy. It simply means creating a balance. So if you're constantly absorbed, thinking, you're constantly having sexual thoughts, so much so that it's interfering in your daily life, then obviously it becomes a problem. Then obviously it will create blockages. And if you forcefully suppress this, it becomes even more stronger. So this is why most young people experience frustration. And especially in our Indian culture, we have this fantasy, we believe that girls are very docile, they don't have any sexual urges, but it is not like that. Human beings are not designed that way. Our brains are not designed that way. Even the girls have all the sexual urges as men have. It's just that in case of women, it's not much talked about. Now, what is right or what is wrong, that I leave to you. That is not my concern. The idea is to create a healthy balance between everything. So, getting married, becoming an householder is not an obstacle to self-realization. That is what Ramana Maharishi says clearly. If you have not known love of a woman, of a man, if you have not experienced that love, then you are missing out on something. So instead of trying to control things to bring about a certain outcome, if we accept what is, if we accept that these are sensations and that there is a need, it is a genuine need of the biological organism, then we don't have to deny ourselves anything. Just by torturing yourself, you're not going to attain enlightenment. You're not going to open your third eye. The awakening of third eye means wisdom, the destruction of illusion. And trying to control the sexual urges can be a part of the illusion. Of course, it does not mean that you become reckless and start having, start thinking about sex all the time or start finding people. That's not what I'm telling you here. What I'm saying is that this is a potent energy. It is given to us by nature and it will be there. Nobody is free of this. So it is much easier to accept ourselves as sexual beings rather than fighting this urge and, making our life miserable. It is there. What can we do about it? And the idea that it is ugly, that somehow it is repulsive. I don't know about Western nations, but in Indian culture, I've seen this a lot, that young folks, in front of their parents, they will, the parent and child dynamic will be such that the parents will say, oh, ugly thing, dirty thing, don't talk about it. And the children will act as if, they know nothing about things. Even my children are growing up. They are learning a lot. And they are being exposed to all of this. But the thing is, with understanding, when you have good understanding of your sexuality, you don't go to destructive resources like pornography, which is extremely artificial, unreal, and unhealthy. The pornography will fry your brain chips, because that is not how a sexual activity happens. Sex is about connection with your partner. Sex is yoga. It is union. I'm not talking about tantra and all those practices. That is something different. I'm just pointing to a very simple thing: union between the two. That union, that energy brings about a sense of bonding with the other person. It creates trust. And it has to be done in a very respectable manner. What pornography shows is extremely artificial. It's extremely unreal, completely fabricated. So if you're learning from that source, then be very careful. Because that is going to just numb your brain. So rather than controlling yourself in the hope of achieving enlightenment or this or that, see, that is also the ego, isn't it? Which wants to achieve something by giving up something. So it says, okay, the sexual energy is the strongest energy, so let me give up that. Then I will be different from the rest. This is what young monks have been doing for ages. And then you hear news like recently in Thailand, there were one or two monks who were caught masturbating. One monk was masturbating watching a woman's legs. He was just seated right next to that woman. Now, why does these kind of things happen? When you push it down all the time, when you suppress yourself all the time, after certain years, it starts becoming toxic. It becomes toxic for the mind. That's why most of the rishis in the Hindu culture were initially married. They were all married. They had families. They had children. Somewhere this culture came where this idea came up that practice brahmacharya, celibacy, never get married, never have children. And this was completely flawed idea, because then you are fighting against something which is very potent. So think about it. Of course, you have to create a balance. So there is a difference between suppression and an empowering control. And nobody is going to teach you that. You have to discover it for yourself.